Welcome to this explainer on the hidden history of human waste and sanitation. When we study history, we almost always focus on the grand narratives, right? The rulers, the massive wars, the sweeping political events. But if we truly want to understand how everyday people lived, survived, and built actual civilizations, we have to look underground. We have to reconstruct the visceral, everyday reality of how our ancestors managed their most basic biological functions. So, what is the true scent of civilization? To really inhabit the past, we have to bypass our modern assumptions of comfort and confront the terrifying constraints of human density without modern plumbing. Try to imagine the sensory landscape of an expanding ancient city. It wasn't just the smell of baking bread or blacksmith's forges. The true scent of civilization was often the suffocating, inescapable odor of untreated human waste. For thousands of years, the survival of literally any major settlement depended entirely on a single pressing question: where does the waste go? And if a society failed to answer that question, the consequences were not just unpleasant, they were deadly.
To give you a stark sensory immersion into what happens when sanitation fails, we're going to start our journey in medieval Germany, July 26, 1184. King Henry VI convenes a court in Erfurt to settle a land dispute among the nobility. Dozens of aristocrats are gathered in a room, completely unaware that directly beneath the wooden floorboards lies a massive, unemptied cesspit.
Act 1. The Zenith.
The trajectory of human hygiene is absolutely not a straight line of constant improvement. Actually, archaeological evidence proves that the Indus Valley and Minoan civilizations possessed an astonishingly advanced mastery of hydraulic engineering millennia before the Romans even got started. Take Mohenjo-Daro, an Indus Valley city from way back in 2600 BCE. They used kiln-fired bricks and natural bitumen to create waterproof public baths, and almost every single house had a dedicated washroom connected to an underground street drainage system. Or look at the island of Crete around 2000 BCE. The Minoan palace of Knossos used tapered, interlocking terracotta pipes that created incredibly tight seals to maximize water flow. They even had what is widely recognized as the earliest flush toilet in history. It was a seat over an underfloor channel, flushed manually by pouring water from pottery jugs. These early plumbers were truly the unsung architects of human density.
Now fast forward to the Roman Empire. Sanitation was scaled up dramatically, but it was a highly social, communal, and class-divided reality. The Romans built the Cloaca Maxima, this massive sewer system linking Rome's drains to the Tiber River. But for the everyday citizen, using the bathroom was a very public affair. They used forica, dark rooms lined with U-shaped stone benches dotted with keyhole openings. You would sit quite literally within arm's reach of your neighbor, doing your business in a totally shared space. And since toilet paper didn't exist, they used a communal tersorium. That was a sea sponge fixed on a stick, which was just rinsed in a shared bowl of water and vinegar between uses.
Act 1, Part 2. The Scent of Roman Coin.
Moving beyond just disposal, Rome actually transformed human waste into a highly prized, taxable commodity. They didn't just flush it away. They recognized the profound economic value embedded in what the human body leaves behind. Following the chaotic Year of the Four Emperors, Emperor Vespasian took power and found the imperial treasury completely depleted. So, to rebuild the state's finances, he did something unprecedented. He enacted a commercial tax on the collection of urine from public urinals. When his son, Titus, protested this highly unseemly tax, Vespasian famously held a gold coin under his nose and asked if it smelled. The response, pecunia non olet, or money doesn't stink, has echoed through history ever since.
So, why would anyone buy urine in the first place? Well, urine degrades into ammonia, making it an incredibly valuable industrial resource. Because urine contains urea, if you let it sit for a day or so, it turns into ammonia, which is an incredible, slightly alkaline cleanser that eats right through acidic dirt and grease. Roman launderers, known as fullers, would literally stand in vats of aged urine stomping on dirty togas to bleach them bright white. Tanners used it to soak animal hides and loosen the hair. And yes, many Romans even used it as a makeshift toothpaste to whiten their teeth. It was a vital chemical raw material that was woven deeply into the fabric of their everyday industrial economy.
Act 2. The Regression.
When the grand, centralized authority of the Western Roman Empire collapsed, so did its massive aqueducts and municipal sewers. Centralized hydraulic engineering vanished entirely, replacing flowing water with stagnant, fermenting pits. Sanitation became a very localized, private, and precarious responsibility. In medieval castles, waste was often dropped straight down a stone shaft, called a garderobe, right into the moat below. But in crowded towns and monasteries, they relied on subterranean, stone-lined cesspits. These pits just sat there, storing human waste for months or even years, requiring grueling manual clearing in the dead of night by laborers known as night soil men. This static, unmoving system created a literal ticking time bomb beneath the feet of medieval society.
Which brings us back to the Erfurt latrine disaster of 1184. By midday, the combined weight of dozens of assembled nobles proved to be just too much for the structural integrity of the wooden floor. It gave way, plunging the aristocracy straight through the ground floor and directly into that fermenting cesspit we talked about earlier. Now, King Henry VI survived unharmed by desperately clinging to the iron rails of a window, but approximately 60 local nobles perished that afternoon, many drowning in the accumulated waste. It stands as a truly harrowing testament to the unseen structural hazards shaping everyday medieval existence.
Act 3. The Breaking Point and Rebirth. Fast forward to the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution brought a massive, unprecedented influx of people into cities like London, but the sewer systems absolutely had not caught up. At the time, the medical establishment was fiercely debating two prevailing theories, totally unaware that their overflowing sewages were directly contaminating the city's drinking wells. Leading experts, including Florence Nightingale, firmly believed in miasma theory, the idea that diseases like cholera were caused by inhaling foul-smelling, decaying organic matter in the air, essentially bad air. But a skeptical physician named Dr. John Snow proposed a rival idea, germ theory. He argued that cholera was a morbid matter, likely a cell, transmitted from person to person by ingesting contaminated water. The establishment, however, found his theory peculiar and pretty much dismissed it entirely. 616. That staggering number represents the lives lost in just one Soho neighborhood during the horrifying Broad Street cholera outbreak of 1854. In late August of that year, the disease struck with terrifying ferocity. Over just 3 days, 127 people near Broad Street died. By the time the outbreak finally subsided, 616 individuals had perished, and 3/4 of the neighborhood's residents had fled in terror. Snow documented it as the most terrible outbreak of cholera which ever occurred in the kingdom.
Acting as an early epidemiological detective, Dr. John Snow utilized rigorous data mapping to prove that the disease was waterborne, effectively giving birth to modern public health. Snow didn't just guess, he meticulously investigated. He mapped the individual water pumps and created what we now call a Voronoi diagram, plotting the deaths around the closest available water sources. The geographic cluster undeniably pointed to a single public well, the Broad Street pump. Armed with this hard, empirical evidence, he convinced the local parish authorities to remove the pump's handle, which immediately halted the localized threat.
And he had an incredible piece of supporting evidence. A fascinating historical anomaly at a local brewery provided Snow with the perfect control group to validate his controversial theory. Right in the middle of this death zone, the workers at the Broad Street Brewery remained completely untouched by cholera. Why? Well, they were given a daily allowance of beer and abstained entirely from the local well. Furthermore, the process of making beer involves boiling the unfermented wort, a process that unknowingly killed the deadly cholera bacteria. It was the definitive proof Snow needed that the water, not the smell of the air, was the killer.
Yet, unbelievably, the political establishment resisted Snow's findings. That is, until the stench of centuries of accumulated human waste fermenting in the heat became so suffocating that Parliament had to soak their blinds in chloride of lime just to conduct government business. In the summer of 1858, temperatures soared to 36 degrees Celsius, about 97 degrees Fahrenheit. The River Thames dried up, exposing a massive, fermenting shoreline of raw human and industrial effluent. The smell was so apocalyptic it became known as the Great Stink. The elite lawmakers at Westminster were driven out of their own halls by the sheer olfactory terror of the river.
Which leads us to the sewers that saved us.
82. The establishment could ignore the plight of the poor in Soho, but they absolutely could not ignore the stench overwhelming the Houses of Parliament. They needed a massive, unprecedented solution, so engineer Joseph Bazalgette designed 82 miles of massive interceptor sewers, a monumental feat of engineering that permanently diverted waste away from London's water supply and effectively eradicated cholera. In a massive 16-year project, Bazalgette built over 1,000 miles of street drains feeding into these gigantic brick-lined tunnels.
This system carried the effluent far downstream, safely away from the city's drinking water. It was this monumental public works project, inspired by a horrific stench and guided by the data of pioneers like John Snow, that finally broke the back of King Cholera and established the modern urban sanitation standards we rely on today.
As we reflect on this incredible journey, from the advanced pipes of the Indus Valley to Baselget's massive Victorian sewers, we really have to ask ourselves if we take the most vital biological machinery of our modern world entirely for granted. The history of human waste is, at its core, the history of human survival. We've replaced the communal sponges and the deadly cesspits with porcelain and buried pipes, essentially hiding the true cost of our dense urban lives. But those Victorian systems are now aging, and global populations are expanding faster than ever. The next time you turn a tap or flush a toilet, remember the centuries of ingenuity, the devastating plagues, and the sheer engineering willpower it took to make that simple luxury possible. What will it take to secure the foundations of our cities for the next 1,000 years?